Thanks for tuning in to the Women's Vibrancy Code, a podcast dedicated to helping women move from exhausted to energized, balance their hormones, and feeling turned on by their life, their lover, and themselves. I'm your host, Maraya Brown. I'm a Yale and functional medicine trained women's health expert, midwife, mom, keynote speaker, and self-made entrepreneur. I'm the founder of my signature program, the Women's Vibrancy Code. So sit back, relax, and let's chat about your energy, hormones, libido, and embracing your feminine power. Oh, and you might want to have pen and paper to take some notes on some of these episodes. To everyone listening in the Women's Vibrancy Code podcast, hello. Big appreciation to you, to the podcast listeners. I love podcasts. They're so great.
Me too. It's been a really fun journey getting into more podcast guesting. It's such a fun way to share and just talk and interact casually. You have more time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a lot of fun.
And of course, the way I roll is this is very unscripted. You know, I have Nicole's bio, some questions that maybe we'll ask, and I'm trusting that this conversation is going to weave and go exactly where it needs to go. So appreciate you. Always love a review. You're welcome to reach out to either of us. I think both of us are quite approachable. And really what we're talking about today, well, let me just read Nicole's bio and then let's get moving and grooving and see where this conversation goes. So Nicole is a high performance coach and fractional chief operating officer. And she works currently as the fractional chief OO for an international coaching company called Elevated Worldwide. That is run by Tony Child, and I have interviewed him in the podcast. So if you want to learn more about Tony, you're welcome to scroll back into the podcast team. If you can find the episode where I interviewed Tony, that would be fun to put in the show notes. Nicole trains and empowers business leaders, sales leaders, and entrepreneurs to use the power of the mind to achieve true transformation. And after an episode of MS partially paralyzed her in 2003, she began the in-depth study of the mind and body and has lived healthy for 20 years. She also has 20 years of experience in entrepreneurship and corporate business. Oh my goodness. So I guess my first question, Nicole, is if you can go back to 2023, when you were first given the diagnosis.
2003.
Sorry, thank you. Not a year ago, 20 years ago, 2003. Yes. And likely there was all sorts of prognosis and words around expectations of time and what your life would be like. If you go back, and I believe in law of attraction, so we're not going to spend too much time here. But what was that like for you? What do you remember hearing? What was your experience with that moment?
Shock, probably. I really appreciate your awareness though, because I don't spend a lot of time talking about it so that I don't recreate that in my life. And I do share this sometimes because I know it adds value and provides hope and inspiration and ideas for others. Whenever we hear other people's success stories of overcoming things, it can be a light. So for me, it's really fascinating, Maraya. Actually, I think my experience is a little different than some, which I found out over the past 20 years of researching people and the mind and body. But my experience was initially shock. And very quickly, I heard the doctor say, you may be paralyzed forever. You may recover. You may not recover. I heard the words. And for some reason, I did not even for a second believe it. And so this was a gift and a blessing, like for me to have had that moment where I went in one ear, out the other. That was an instantaneous response. Whereas most people, that's not their response. And then they have to use intention and effort to retrain their perspective on when they get that diagnosis and prognosis. to your point, the diagnosis is multiple sclerosis. The prognosis is typically it's a degenerative condition. You sometimes regain functionality, you may not, depending on the form. It often progresses. You may end up in a wheelchair. It's like I literally heard those words and immediately didn't believe them. Like for real. I was like,
Yeah.
obviously I'm gonna recover. My
Yeah.
family thought I was naive, living on a cloud, but like I don't think she heard the doctor. So
Well, you know that what the
fascinating.
visual that I have is this is silly. You know those sticky things that we hang in doorways to catch flies?
Oh yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like you didn't allow it to stick.
Yeah.
Some people will hear something, a diagnosis, a prognosis. My daughter out on the playground at age 9, and she comes home so frustrated at the boys, and she's letting it stick.
Hmm.
And in your scenario, you simply didn't let it stick.
Hmm.
It went in one ear, and what I heard you say is right out the other.
Now I will say the diagnosis I did stick because I saw the MRI, I saw the multiple lesions. So I didn't actually disagree with the diagnosis of multiple sclerosis, and I physically had symptoms. So I didn't disagree with that. What I did disagree with love and positive vibes, not with anger and
Mhm.
frustration, was I didn't believe the prognosis. So I didn't
Yeah.
believe when they said you might not recover. I was like, obviously I'm going to, and I spoke like this because it was 20 years ago. I'm like, obviously they're mistaken. Of course I'm going to
Right.
recover. Why would they even say that?
Yeah. And so
Um,
do you think
but
from that point, I'm going to give two examples and maybe it's neither, maybe it's somewhere in the middle, but did you go into warrior mode or did you go into surrender mode? Like, obviously, you did a lot of changes to your nutrition and your belief systems and your lifestyle. Do you think, like, if there's a divergent path, which
hmm,
direction did it go?
that is such a cool question. My first thought to your question was surrender.
Hmm.
And if you looked at my actions, I think you would say that I went into warrior mode. So, but the
Hmm.
energy of surrender, maybe if that explains it, like the
Yeah.
energy, the feeling was flow, but the action was a lot of action. I
Yeah.
invested in naturopathic doctors, nutritionists, chiropractor, osteopath, every possible. There was no amount of time or money that was too much because I had 100% faith that if this doesn't work, I'll try the next thing. If this doesn't work, I'll try the next thing. Oh, that didn't work. Okay, I'll try the next thing. So I was in an energy of surrender and flow, taking a lot of action
Yeah. Yeah. And
and
was there
willing to
any part of,
change things quickly. Like
yeah.
change my diet, change my like supplements, like willing to implement immediately
Hmm.
because I had so much faith and belief that why would I not try this if it could possibly work?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Was there any part of you that went through like, did I miss the signs? Is there something I could have done before to have blunted this trajectory? Like, I think
Yeah.
back when I had my miscarriage, that was one of my most devastating. And I definitely got caught in the wheel of, here I am, I'm a healthcare provider. I knew better. Did I miss something? Is there something I could have done differently? Was there any part of that for you?
I definitely, when I looked back, like life gives us lessons and signs and opportunities to see it if we choose to. Um, Looking back, I was extremely stressed, like overwhelmed. The people who know me today as this positive, very understanding, generally patient, like person, I was showing up with in like everything is urgent. If I don't get straight A's, like the world is ending. Like it's like we're
Hmm.
not going to make it through. Like it was so, I really had so much pressure on
Hmm.
myself, so much attachment, so attached to my results, right? Like not, so I was absolutely not in surrender prior to that. So when I look back, and I know that MS, and not even just MS, many health conditions are triggered from stress, from
Hmm.
some form of emotional, experience. And so I definitely saw the connection after that. I mean, I could have had lesions in my brain that never ever showed up in a physical action reaction or physical embodiment of it if I didn't trigger it with my state. So I
Yeah.
did, that was actually a great lesson because I, from that moment on, changed my lifestyle, like in terms of how I
Mm-hmm.
approach attachment. Can I be open to things and unattached to things? Like that would never have been my
Mm-hmm.
previous perspective. So,
Mm-hmm. Open
and
and
I do want to
unattached.
add, Mariah, you said something a little while ago about how with my, when I received that diagnosis and prognosis, I heard it and I chose to not let it stick.
Yeah.
And you said many people let it stick. I would say that most people let it stick, especially when it comes from a professional,
Yeah.
from a medical professional or a lawyer or like maybe other professionals who are credible and in some cases they're well intended. And so really it is often that people will accept and they will let it stick. And I saw that time and time again for many, many years, which is why I got into positive psychology and the mind, because I was like, ooh,
Mm-hmm.
they're all letting it stick. I didn't use that
Yeah.
language, but I really love that way you said that. And I wanted to help people not let it stick
Right.
because they're only,
Let
they can't transform if they're letting that stick.
let's catch flies instead of
Yeah.
health
Beliefs
prognosis.
that are not serving you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so, for those that are listening, of course, we're going to get into what did you change with your nutrition and your lifestyle, but a lot of your deep dive was in beliefs and self-image.
Mhm.
And so, before that 2003 moment, had you already started a deep dive into your belief systems and self-image and law of attraction? No. Okay, so it was completely new for you.
0%.
Okay, okay. So where did you start?
I actually started when I got the diagnosis and had that belief that I was 100% going to heal, and then therefore found all the tools to do that. Um, it didn't understand psychology or the mind at all. I wasn't even researching or studying that. I was only looking at nutrition, lifestyle supplements, stuff like that field. It wasn't till almost 10 years later that I stumbled into the psychology of it. And then looking back, I was like, oh, I had belief. I didn't let it stick. Like the things we're talking about right now, that my awareness of that wasn't there. If you had asked me 2 years after my circumstance, my MS diagnosis, I didn't understand it the way that I do today. So it's pretty neat.
Okay. So
Mhm.
really it wasn't until 10 years. So in that initial 10 years, what are
Mhm.
some of the things that you changed with diet, supplementation, body movement,
Yeah,
lifestyle? I'm
for sure.
imagining that have continued and it's part of the journey. And then let's get into the belief systems and self-image and all the ways that they've created results in your health and your life and your business. But what have you changed from a health perspective? Talking nutrition, supplementation, exercise.
For sure. What I changed once I explain it, I realized after studying it that a lot of those things would help with many neurological conditions, or like it wasn't just MS, it was what I was studying. But then when I expanded my scope, I was like, oh, this helps with basically all things in
Yeah.
right. It's just this can of worms. I hadn't studied nutrition or supplements or psychology at all. I really hadn't studied it before this happened to me. So it was just opening a can of worms. The biggest things lifestyle wise from a nutrition perspective, which I'm not necessarily suggesting that all humans should or should not do, but for me, it worked for me and it still works for me. I went gluten free and dairy free,
Hmm.
and yeah, I'm not completely a big advocate of every single person should be gluten free or dairy free. So it's personal choice. For me, it was one of those things where I found some research and some professionals in the natural health field who suggested that gluten is inflammatory and it could cause, there is some connection to MS. Today, there's more research on it, but at the time there wasn't that much. But because I believed I was going to heal, someone saying this might work for you was enough. I didn't
Yeah.
need someone to say, here's the magic formula to guarantee your success. That
Hmm.
didn't exist. It still doesn't exist in many cases. It was like, this might work for you. Try it. And that worked for me and it still works for me. I
Yeah.
also discovered that I had a lot of gut issues, and there is a huge correlation with gut and MS. After I studied people with MS later, I found that almost every, maybe all, but at least almost every single one that I had studied had issues with gastrointestinal inner gut stuff. And
Yep.
so that was also why, for me, removing some foods that were irritants in my gut was also helping my brain.
Yep.
The gut
So,
brain.
and I'll be the one to say it. I would say that for most people that I work with, I kind of do recommend that you try going off gluten for some chunk of time. And it is exceptionally inflammatory. And for most, dairy is as well. But then, so there's the things that we take out. I'm assuming you also limited sugar
Yes, for sure.
and
Yeah,
then
those are the
replace.
dairy and gluten were the big ones that shocked people because I
Yeah.
did it overnight
Yeah.
almost.
Yeah.
And they were like, "How did you do that? Why wasn't it hard?" And then I reduced sugar, especially processed sugar, but I didn't completely eliminate
Yeah.
sugar to the degree of gluten and dairy.
And I'm making the assumption that you super loaded and it increased all of the fruits, vegetables, and berries and a variety of plants and probably a lot of them. Is that fair for me to assume?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was targeting like 9 cups a day
Nine
of,
cups.
of
Yeah.
fruits, but I wasn't measuring it or attached. It was,
Yeah.
it's not that strict. I was very, very strict with the elimination of the things that I felt were inflammatory and potentially cause some
Hmm.
triggers, but I wasn't as strict on adding a certain number of, but I
Yep.
added a lot of fruits and veggies, a variety of colors, and
Hmm. Okay. So
I did
taking out,
still have meat. I did not go vegan for those. That could be an option as well, but I did choose to still have
yeah. Yeah.
some meats and fish and
So
things
took
like
out
that.
the pro-inflammatory foods, super loaded the anti-inflammatory foods, kept plant-based or animal-based protein. What about, were there any supplements that were like, ooh, these become non-negotiables for me? And what about body movement?
Yep. I also, in terms of diet, I upped my fat intake.
Hmm.
Avocados, fatty fish, nuts, butter, nut butters. So
I
I,
love it.
I got
I
over
could,
the mental block of low fat and was like, my brain is 80% fat, or some, I may not have the statistics accurate.
yeah, a
So, and I
lot.
need to feed my brain. That's where the lesions are
Yeah.
that caused my physical response. So I did up my diet with, and that kind of goes to supplements. I did, and I still do, all of these are still for the most part true. I now will have gluten occasionally a little bit and it's okay. Like I can have it once in a while, but um if I choose to and I don't feel guilt about it, it's a choice. Um but still 97% gluten free
Yeah.
and mostly dairy free, a little bit of yogurt. I may have some plain yogurt sometimes. Supplements I still took and still take fish oil, pretty
Hmm.
high dose, quite a bit higher than what typically the label recommends. B vitamins, vitamin D. There's a direct correlation with B deficiency and multiple sclerosis. So D, did I say B? D.
Hmm.
Omega 3s, vitamin B vitamins, we could B complex, vitamin D, typically a probiotic or a digestive enzyme or both,
Hmm.
something to help in the gut. Especially, I took a higher potency probiotic for quite a while I was healing the gut.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and now that it's more populated with good bacteria and doing great from has been for many years, I take a lower amount personally. I think that's I do take protein supplement. Usually take a plant-based protein supplement because whey protein is dairy sourced. But I do take a protein supplement also, just
Yeah.
which is not
Nice.
necessarily a pill or anything, but I do to get a little extra protein
Yeah.
in.
And along the, when you say gut stuff, did you ever have your stool test and actual gut microbiome testing? And so then I'm assuming you were put on a pretty personalized and specific protocol for your gut microbiome. And then how often do you retest that one?
Mm, I think I've only tested maybe twice. One of the times I tested though was actually because I think I had like food what was it?
Poisoning or
Food
something?
poisoning. I think it was
Oh,
some form of
yuck.
something that we thought was a parasite or something. So it was more of
Okay.
a acute reaction to something
Yeah,
the
yeah,
second
yeah,
time.
yeah.
Yeah, I've only tested twice. I haven't tested for a long time. That's a good point.
So, okay. Well,
Mhm.
little seed planted. Okay.
Yeah, I'm
Anything
curious
else that
now
you
that you
want to
say it.
say? Anything else that you want to say about diet, supplementation, and lifestyle. I do see videos that you weight lift, so I'm assuming activity and right left brain integration and exercise. Was that already part of your lifestyle before 2003?
I did a little bit of exercise prior to that. So
Hmm.
I was somewhat active. I had done martial arts, I'd done other forms of activities, but I hadn't done a lot of kind of working out.
Yeah,
But after that time, I added yoga. For me personally, just it was kind of strength and calm at the same time. So that really
yeah.
provided me, which I didn't know at the time, but it allowed me to kind of get into a meditation a little bit during savasana. Like it allowed me to kind of calm my mind as well as strengthen my
Hmm.
body. But yeah, I do love and I have loved workouts for 20 years since that
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
When I so I'm very active in like
yeah.
generally I do like to go to the gym. I do like to do some weightlifting, nothing too heavy for the most part, but
Did you have to like I think about when I supported Kathleen Cameron, one of the things that she shares a lot publicly is she had to initially convince herself that she loved salad because she had never eaten any piece of lettuce her entire life until what was it, her early to mid 30s. And it was this effort to convince her brain that she loves salad. And now she does.
Mhm,
Was there any bit of initially like convincing yourself that you love to work out, convincing yourself that you liked fruits and vegetables,
mhm.
and then over time it just became a lifestyle, or was it pretty was it all pretty simple and easy and surrendered the whole time?
You know what? It's an interesting question, and I've analyzed myself quite a bit because I believe that my experience was a little bit unique. Um, because it wasn't that challenging. It almost though, Mariah, it's not, I didn't love it at first, but it was non-negotiable.
Yeah.
So I didn't hate it either.
Yeah.
It was just like it is what it is. Just
Yeah.
is. I am eating this way and I don't hate it and I don't love it. It's just it is. Like so I didn't have resentment or like because people thought, "Oh my goodness, didn't you just want to eat bread and cookies?" And
Yeah.
I didn't even have cravings for the most part for that because it was so I was almost just in a state of I'm a state of unwavering faith that I'm moving in the direction of healing. And so nothing can stop me. So maybe that's where the warrior piece kind of comes in. There was definitely
Yeah.
some warrior energy in there. So I did not love it at first, but I didn't hate it. And it was absolutely through the repetition over
Hmm.
time. With exercise, I find it was people like being inspired by other people, getting to know people at gym, making some friends, like building some connections and community. And that aspect of, for me personally, allows exercise.
Yeah.
It's not just fun because I like to work out by myself in my home gym. I don't really enjoy that much. I enjoy it because I enjoy the dynamic of doing it with others.
Yeah. Okay.
I
So,
learned that from experience, like from going many times to build those connections, and then
yeah.
it turned
Yeah.
into being fun.
And I feel like we're kind of transitioning a bit into the foundation of beliefs. So,
Hmm.
so this became a whole journey, and now it is a large part of your career. I mean, it's what you do, it's the company that you support, which is foundationally supporting people with their beliefs and their self-image and helping them become clear in how that directly impacts the results in their health, their life, and their business.
Hmm.
So, can you speak a little bit to that? What changed in your beliefs? How did you shift your self-image, and what does it look like today?
Hmm. So for me, there's a couple of aspects, I guess, because belief can be the beliefs that you hold about yourself, like the beliefs that I hold about myself, as well as the beliefs that I hold or you hold about your goals or about, your future or about how the world works. Like there's inner beliefs which kind of tie to that identity, like what do I believe about myself? And then there are beliefs that you hold about all these other aspects that are in the kind of outside world.
Yeah.
Um, and I think for me, it was I chose almost unconsciously, I chose automatically to believe that I was a healthy, vibrant, active, strong woman that I was going to get married one day. That was a personal desire, that I was going to have children. I was going to be able to lift them up and I was going to be able to carry them and run with them. So I had a very passionate desire. And
Yeah.
I believe you can tie your beliefs to your desires. If you really want something badly, you have to believe it, first of all. Otherwise, it's impossible to attain it if you don't believe it. You don't have to believe it 100%. You have to have a certain level of belief that it's possible in order to take the actions and move towards it. Um, but I think I just naturally had that. The desire is what fueled my beliefs.
Well, the other thing for me, as you were describing, not just what your health would look like, but the marriage and the children and the ability to pick them up, it gave me visuals. So it wasn't just that you allowed yourself to have desires, but you really painted the picture of what those desires would look like and what your lifestyle would look like. And I don't know about you, but it gave me visuals. So as you were doing the active work to check your beliefs at the door and allow yourself to get really clear on the future version that you desired, it sounds like you really dropped into your imagination to
Mm-hmm.
allow it to become expansive. And did you see it in pictures?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
Yep. I saw it in clear. I actually, now that you say that, I still see the picture that I saw 20 years ago. Well, I
Wow.
experienced it in my life. Now I'm married and have a son, but I saw for some reason, like it sounds like a movie, but of running through a field, chasing my son and picking him up. That was the picture.
Yeah.
It was this super clear picture. And that is something that I invite others to do, is to get a picture of where you're going. If you don't know where you're going, you're not going to get there. You're likely to get
Mhm.
lost. That's what John
Yeah.
Maxwell says, right? Is getting a clear
Mhm.
picture of where you're going. Um, and that is
And
something
that's
I did.
it's a big deal because this contrast of being given how old were you in 2003?
I'm was 21,
Okay, so at the age of
doing mine now.
21, imagine that. I mean, think about this, the age of 21,
Mhm.
being given a diagnosis and a prognosis from the qualified doctors, the gods of health, right? And to instead allow it to go in one ear, not stick, at least for the prognosis, out the other, and instead have this imagination explode your desires into clear pictures of what you were going to create that was so counterintuitive to what the prognosis was. And I think of all the people out in the world that are listening to this, and I'm sure, Nicole, you can give lots of examples of scenarios where you are in a certain reality and it feels so far-fetched, so far away, almost impossible to create a different reality. And yet here you are 21 years later
Mhm.
actively living it. So what are some examples? Like when you think about the clients that you serve and elevated worldwide, the clients that are served by a very large company,
Mhm.
what are examples that you have seen where people have, against all odds, led from their desire, didn't let the belief stick, and instead created a completely different experience than what the prognosis had been?
Oh man, that's such a good question. One example that many of our clients, our community knows, but it just resonates so well with what you're sharing is Nafe Latu. I don't know if you know Nafe,
I don't know that.
but
Oh, I think I've seen
from
pictures of him at
Tonga. Yeah.
he was at one of the Pivot Point events.
Yep.
I saw a
Yeah.
picture of him. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
he just we worked them for a year in our program, but he has such an inspiring story. You got to hear him speak. Because where he grew up, they were in extreme poverty. Hopefully it's okay that I share this story, but he shared a story. It was such extreme poverty that they would like he would and they had their clothes out on lines. They didn't have washers and dryers. He knew which houses had the same size as him, and he would at night maybe sneak a shirt from someone. Very honest, authentic person is just living this is the living in extreme poverty where you're just in survival mode.
Yeah.
Um, one of his parents passed away when he was pretty young. I think it was his mother, and he had multiple siblings. They were trained to not have emotion. Like
Mm.
you don't cry, you don't express emotion. So it was like this very just hard life. When he came to the US, not Canada, but when he came to the US, it was like relearning all of this way of living and these different belief patterns. And at first, he got into. I'm going to jump ahead just to get through the end of the story. He got into being a barber. That was a choice that he got into. He was a barber, charging maybe $50 an hour or something like that. And about I might be getting my timelines wrong, so I don't want to be totally accurate, but let's say maybe 6 months ago or
Hmm.
so, he's now, if you want to get if you want to go to Nafelatu for a haircut, it's $600. He now is cutting professional athletes. Like he has
Hmm.
completely transformed his identity and his experience. He can't not cry every time he tells a story. It's like he spent his whole
Mm.
childhood not allowed to cry, and now every time he shares a story, he's so inspiring that he kind of allows himself to get into those emotional
Yeah.
states. But like absolutely against all odds, he's like the highest paid barber in Utah, coming
Right.
from such an extreme paradigm, a belief system, and a circumstance that no one would ever believe. His family would never believe that he could be where
Right.
he is today.
So I love this example because you're an example of health. You're
Hmm.
giving an example of our experience of emotion and our experience and our relationship with money and lifestyle.
Hmm.
And what you're saying is the way that he changed that, and also the way that you created the reality that you're existing in today is by simply, is it inserting new beliefs? And talk a little bit through what does the process look like? What did he go through? What did you go through to change the beliefs?
For sure. I don't know the very beginning of his process, but I would definitely say, and maybe just some of the processes that like I know we facilitate just for explanation purposes. Um, he went through a 3-day intensive. It's called
Does that
BU.
be you?
Yeah,
Ooh.
it's like a deep therapy for 3 days. So it's an unpeeling of who you're not.
Hmm.
So to your point of adding or taking away beliefs, like it was a deep 3-day deep dive in taking away all these beliefs. No, you're not that. 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 You just believe that, but you're not actually that. So it's this
Hmm.
uncovering of who you're not. And then you go back, and he went back for the second part, which is now inserting all the beliefs of who you really are. And so
Yeah.
that was extremely transformative for him because he had such a deep paradigm, a belief system, a programming from childhood that was so far fetched. So for him, I know that was one of it. He's sent so many people now to go through it because it was so transformative for him personally. And then the second thing has been like a constant gradual repetition of inserting new beliefs. So once
Hmm.
he did all that like clearing out, and it's like on an ongoing basis, remembering who you are, what are the beliefs you're choosing
Hmm.
to keep, and also having a spirit of gratitude. That's something that I preach like so much, like just being present and grateful with where you're at. And he really embodies that. He embodies the essence of gratitude,
Yeah.
which I believe is essential to change your beliefs,
Hmm.
because you have to be in a state of kind of abundance and presence to be able to shift your beliefs.
And I know so many people that have been through BU. So for those of you listening, Tony and I are part of a mastermind together. Nicole and I have known each other for at least a few years, and kind of
Yeah,
lots of
all these
crossover in
connections.
communities. I've been in Elevated Worldwide as a guest teacher or coach, and boy, oh boy, I hear a lot of astounding things about BU. And I got to be honest, it makes my knees quiver. Like I hear it is a complete um like crumbling of self, and big and profound, but you've got to really be ready for it. And BU wasn't around for you 20 years ago. And it sounded like 10 years into your journey is when you started inserting new beliefs. So what resources did you use when you started this journey of self-image and probably redefining failure versus success and redefining belief systems? Where how did you figure this stuff out, and who did you hire, and what books did you read, and what was your journey like?
Oh, absolutely. So at the very beginning, I would use the term unconscious competent. I was
Hmm.
doing visualization. I was working, I consciously every day was choosing a different belief, even despite what the professionals said. Like I had unwavering faith. I took massive action with the surrendering state. I didn't take
Mhm.
action in fear and doubt. I took action in faith. So I did all
Yeah.
these things unconsciously. Like I knew what I was doing, but I didn't understand the psychology behind it. So just to go back to the initial process for me, I just didn't, it was unconscious competent. I was doing all these things, but I couldn't explain to you the psychology behind why I was doing all those things.
Yeah.
Today, I can now look back and say, oh my goodness, I changed my beliefs and my self-image and my actions, and I had a vision and I had meaning, I had purpose. Like I was grateful. I did all these things that I now can kind of articulate. I changed my paradigm. I changed my subconscious patterning, but I just but the crazy thing though, Maraya, because I had done that with my health and I was an unconscious competent, I would like to say, I was not capable at that time of reapplying that into my business, into my relationships, into other areas of life because I didn't know what I did. I knew the actions I took, I knew the supplements I took,
Yeah.
the diet, I knew what I had changed, but I didn't know the mindset I had shifted. I didn't know how I did it. So I wasn't able
Mhm.
to shift that mindset into other areas. So at the 10-year mark, when I got into this, around the 10-year mark, 10, 11 years maybe, it was Bob Proctor. So the same way that Tony got
Okay.
into this industry, I was listening to a health podcast and he said, before we get into this health topic today, I don't even remember what the topic was, but he said, before we get into this health topic, I'm going to bring in my friend Bob Proctor to tell you about his next event. And for those who don't know Bob Proctor, he passed a couple years ago, but he was one of the world's greatest teachers in positive psychology and mindset and
Yeah.
ran Proctor Gallagher Institute. So that I was listening to a health podcast, but through law of attraction, whatever you want to call it, I heard Bob Proctor's voice and I said, whoa, he's talking about stuff that I think I experienced, but I couldn't put words to it. And he said, I'm doing a 3-day event starting in 3 days. Can you come? And I'm like, yep.
And he was in Canada and you're in Canada. So was
Yes.
it
It,
geographically close?
he lives in Canada. The event was in LA. I
Okay.
joined virtually because I
Okay.
had a 6-month baby at the time and a retail business that I was running. And I was also sick, which is why I was at home listening to the podcast. So I joined virtually, but I watched the entire 3 days. And that
Hmm.
was my first introduction into this world of positive psychology, if you'll call it, understanding vibration, understanding having vision, understanding the fact that you can set a goal that is not logical. Like I just that never crossed my mind before that you can set a goal that's not logical, that you don't have to connect all the dots before you set the goal. And then this idea of your paradigms, this idea of
Yeah.
subconscious programming. That was way out, never heard that before.
And it sounds like, because what I heard you say a little bit ago was initially it was just through the lens of health, and you hadn't really made the leap that this belief system and positive mindset could also play out in your relationships and your business and your money and other areas of your life. And so I'm assuming
Mhm.
that then the change took place. And so then you created all sorts of transformation, not just in your health. So then what else transpired for you that feel like kind of jaw-dropping manifestations through belief change?
For sure. I had worked in corporate for 10 years. So I had been like relatively successful in business, but when I started my own business, I didn't know all this stuff. So I was struggling when I first started my own business. And this was a couple years into it when I stumbled into Bob Proctor. I signed up to become a certified consultant. So after that 3-day event, I talked to Bill Banta. who I think you've met, Bill Vanta.
Yeah, Bill and Tony and I have had a couple calls. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I talked to Bill and I said, this is the secret I've been missing in my life. Like, oh my goodness, how did I not know this? I was looking around on my, I was like, am I the only one who doesn't know about the subconscious mind and about beliefs and a vision? And how did I not learn this in school? I'm like, I was 31 at this point. And so like it just blew me away. So I decided I signed up to become a certified consultant under PG with PGI. That was my
Hmm.
first step. My first transformation was to jump in and to change my career, to literally get out of my retail business, move full time into coaching in this field of high performance mindset, positive psychology, leadership. And I started initially on my own, and I asked Bill, "Hey, is there someone you would recommend that I talk to who's really rocking it in this industry, who's really good that you think maybe I could just like network with, learn from?" And he said, "You got to talk to Tony Child.
Yeah.
Let me connect you guys." And so
Hmm.
we were actually both independent consultants, but very quickly when we started just working together as peers, like separately, I realized that, oh man, I want to work with this guy. I need to figure out where he's going and where this is leading. I didn't know. And it was not till about 2 or 3 years later where we actually started to work together.
Okay. So then how long have you been the COO for Elevated?
Um, maybe maybe 2 years.
Fun.
I kind of transitioned. I
Yeah.
started coaching with Elevated. And it was actually interesting, Maraya, is that because of my experience in my running my business initially, I was like, oh, I'm kind of going to take a break on the pressure of running a business. I thought I just wanted to get into coaching for a while. I was coaching for quite a few years until I was in the business with Elevated Worldwide and Tony Child. And I was like, oh, but here's an opportunity to do this. Like all my business background and knowledge and training was just kind of sneaking in.
Hmm.
And so I kind of gradually started running more of the business side of it. So I
Yeah.
didn't have a hard one day. I just started doing all of the business operations. I kind of
Yeah.
gradually moved into it until I reached the level where I was basically running all of the business operations.
And so in that scenario, it wasn't like a very deliberate, here's my vision, here's where I want my career to go. It's just unfolded very um, naturally and casually. And I get the impression that you love what you do. You're actively creating the life that you dream of.
Mhm.
And and then you mentioned gratitude in there. We were just in Sedona with I was there with Tony, and it was so fascinating. One of the things that he said, he was sharing his morning gratitude practice, and one of the things I heard is in his prayers aren't the things that he's asking for. His prayers are sharing gratitude for the things that maybe you would ask for, but gratitude for those things already becoming reality.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
future gratitudes,
yeah,
essentially.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so okay, I'm aware of time. We have about 6 minutes left, and we've kind of woven in and out of so many different topics. Is there anything in particular that feels like, wait, I want to make sure before we finish, we cover this? Like this feels really important for me to be able to say out loud to those that are listening.
I think really I think the biggest thing is that you are all worthy of having a big dream, a big goal, living vibrantly, right? As Mariah would say, like you can have the health, you can have it's we have so many limiting beliefs that stop us. That's where the logic, right? Oh no, I can't because I don't have enough time, I don't have enough experience, I don't have this. Um,
This
can't,
doctor told me I can't. This
yeah,
expert told me it's not possible. This
yeah.
mother or father told me I would never, blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely. We
Yeah.
have all these beliefs that are not true. They're the false beliefs are what hold you back, not the truth. The truth is that you are capable. And it is important to shift the perspective with gratitude, in my opinion, as one vehicle. There's
Mhm.
many other ways. And get really clear on where you're going. Like when we talked about my vision when I had MS, And I was still paralyzed at this time. I couldn't move my right arm and leg, right side. And I saw myself running in the field with my husband behind and chasing my son and picking him up. And like, I didn't, I believed it wholeheartedly.
Hmm.
Most of the time, people have to cultivate their belief. I was blessed to have this deep faith in myself at that time. In other areas of my life, I have to cultivate the belief. I don't just innately have that level of complete faith in every single circumstance, right? Most people have to choose, once you decide where you want to go, to choose to cultivate that belief. And I just feel so passionately about people feeling willing to believe that more, whatever that looks like. It doesn't have to be a big, owning a private jet. It may be if that's it, but it can be whatever it is for each individual. But just being willing to know that it is possible and just seeking the
Hmm.
people, the circumstances, the training, whatever it is for you personally,
Yeah.
willing to
So
make.
we have your Facebook handle, Instagram handle, website that will be in the show notes. For those watching in Facebook, I'll make sure and add those into the comments. In your scenario, you went to a Bob Proctor event.
Hmm.
And I also heard you mention John Maxwell. So I'm assuming you read some John Maxwell. But for those, Bob Proctor has passed. And so for someone who's leaning in and going, wow, yeah, I would love to dream bigger. I would love to start changing my beliefs. I would love to learn more about your work, Nicole, but where do begin?
Hmm.
What do you say to those individuals?
I would probably recommend we do events now. Key Elevated Worldwide
Hmm.
does in-person events and virtual because I'm in Canada, so I go into Utah. It's typically for in-person, but the by the time this is aired live, it'll still be called Pivot Point, I'm sure. We have an in-person event called Pivot Point and virtual events. Like those, it's called Pivot Point because it is a pivot point. You people enter that room and they come out with a different perspective. It's not the end of the road. There's many more things after, like, to continue the journey, but the willing that event, Tony and I both um experience our breakthroughs in our first event, and which is why we offer an event now, because
Yeah.
we know that it's like an immersion experience. You need a wake up call, a little smack in the face, wake up, and then you can choose what to do with your new awareness. But at least we feel like you've had a pivot, you've tweaked enough. So it's keepelevated.com is the website that we list those events. But that, based on what you just mentioned, that
Yeah.
probably is a good place to go because
Yeah.
you know.
So the two websites are keepelevated.com and NicoleKernohan.com. Once again, I'll put them in the comments. They'll be in the show notes. What about BU? So BEYOU, for those of you that are wondering. The
Oh
best,
yes.
it sounds like I've never done Landmark, but it sounds like it's kind of similar, and especially in foundation, kind of where the foundation came from. It's kind of like Landmark, but without the salesy stuff. It's kind of what I'm hearing.
Mhm.
Um, is that fair to kind of make that
I've also
comparison?
not done Landmark, and I've heard
Okay.
of it, but I don't want to inaccurately do a comparison.
Okay.
Um, but yes, if they come through, Keep Elevate, or reach out to me, we can
Yeah.
get connected through to a BU event as well.
Okay.
It's funny that you say that though, Mariah, because oftentimes Pivot Point, that event that's called Pivot Point, is an easier step before going to
Okay.
BU
Okay.
for many people because it's a super low investment, but it's also just it's the aha awakening, less intimidating, um, and then from there going into be you do you but and if someone was listening today and they're like, I skipped the pivot point, I just need to go straight in to BU. Absolutely, we have many people who go straight in there, but I didn't say that because that was not my first experience.
Yeah.
My first experience was a bit more, so pivot point is a bit more educational. There's some interactive coaching. It's kind of like that.
Yeah.
Whereas BU is an immersion experience. No, you don't take notes. You're experiencing.
Yeah. It sounds like BU is like a full dismantling, a
Yeah.
full dismantling of who I'm not.
And may I just leave you with you personally, Mariah, as well as anyone listening. Don't be afraid.
Hmm.
It's a
No,
gift and a blessing. It's
I will say, and to those that are listening, my husband and I both desire, my desire is to go with my husband to do it together.
that's
And we
great.
have been trying for, gosh, almost a year now. But often the dates for BU aren't planned super far in advance. And so far, there has not been a date and location that has worked because my travel schedule has been so intense. But the good news is in 2024, my full intention is to start reducing the amount of travel. So that frees up more schedule. And we have three young children and blah, 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 blah. Not important for today. My main thing I want to end with is thank you, Nicole, for sharing your journey, for having the belief that was so strong, and for the prognosis to not stick as a way that kind of paves the path for those that are out there. So if you are out there and you have been given some prognosis or diagnosis about the type of life you're going to live, what your potential is with wealth, a health diagnosis of Hashimoto's or Graves or fibromyalgia or MS or cancer, whatever it may be, of course, start taking the steps like Nicole did with nutrition and personalized supplementation and getting into gut health. And of course, me and the team can help you with all of that. And to remember the potency of our belief systems and not letting these prognoses stick. There's a reason why miracles happen. There's a reason why prayer works. There's a reason why you hear over and over again these like defying all odds stories. And my guess is the almost all of those individuals, if I could interview them on this podcast, they are all going to share similar stories that surround around the theme of their beliefs and just not allowing it to stick. Would you agree?
Uh-huh. Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. They call it give up itis, I think, at the hospital.
Mhm.
If like you can predict someone's um there's some connection to their prognosis based on their level of
Yeah.
belief.
Yeah.
Like
Give up itis.
don't give up. Don't catch give up itis. Catch belief
Yeah.
itis.
Yeah. Catch
And
beliefitis in your worthiness and your amazing socialization skills and your ability to create the dreams and have the babies and the happy marriage and the healthy body and all the things that are absolutely there for us to experience. Yeah. All right, Nicole. Thank you
well,
so
thank you
much.
so much for having me. This
Of
was
course,
great.
of course.